very particular laws and regulations in different jurisdictions. I remember first time we really dealt with that was in Louisiana, where there are parishes, and the parish has a much different structure for taxes and regulations as well. So it's really important to go hyper local when you're doing your due diligence and understand some of the regulations and different nuances with regard to the different geographies. The state level, I think that's the first filter, of course, judicial versus non-judicial, understanding exactly what type of foreclosure process you'll be dealing with if you go through that when you actually acquire a non-performer. But going down to the local level, the borough, the township, the county, and understanding a little bit more about that specific jurisdiction, super valuable in your due diligence. And something that we've talked about before is using census data in your due diligence. And census data can give you a lot of information about median incomes and home values and occupations and demographics. And there's a lot of nuance there that you can uncover as you start to see the trends in population increasing or decreasing, whether it's a growth area or closer to an urban area that's growing. So that's all sort of the inside track on due diligence, where it's not immediately clear to the other buyers that you're competing with. If they're not going to that much detail to look into the trends of the market and the real estate in that market, then they might miss some things that you could identify, both to the positive and to the downside, whether or not a certain area has a high crime rate or population is decreasing versus a growth area where there's maybe new industries coming into town. And of course, real estate's the underlying asset behind these mortgage notes. So the value of the homes is going to be critical in the future of those deals, especially on the non-performing side. In a lot of areas where you might be compelled because the property is beautiful, there's things behind the surface that are tough and you need to understand. And in general, it's very important when you're buying any portfolio or individual asset to think in terms of diversifying. And if you would decide to buy a judicial state or buying in Hawaii, for example, having a couple of loans in some quicker foreclosure states like Texas or Arizona, for example, so that you've got some early winners that you can work through that won't be dragged out to the end of a foreclosure that could take a couple of years. Just so you've got a few things in the pipeline there, a few irons in the fire. Because if all of your portfolio is concentrated in one area, where the good news is it's a lot of hurrying up and waiting, right? You're putting your attorney on the case and you're making sure that they're following the next steps. But a lot of the time, you're just waiting for that next step to happen. So having some other assets in other areas where you can continue to move the ball forward and you're not totally just waiting all the time is really useful. Because at the end of the day, I mean, there is a lot of waiting in this business that you can fill with sourcing and acquisitions work, due diligence. But when you're actually doing your portfolio management, that's where you're going to actually bring in some money. And you want to make sure that you've got earlier wins than waiting until the entire foreclosure process is completed. But as you guys know, we're not sending demand letters. So ideally, a lot of these borrowers are going to reach out after the demand letter is sent. And in that time, you'll hopefully have some conversations with the homeowner that will yield some modification agreements, some payoffs, and not have to go through that entire foreclosure process, because that is definitely a longer term play. And in some states, it can take a long time, but you are the lender, you've got the leverage. It's just a matter of using the legal process for that leverage.
Nobody is talking about the revolution happening in real estate, where regular investors can earn great profits while helping homeowners that the banks have failed. Join the movement and start your journey into note investing at FIXnotes.com.